Where the Lonely Ones Roam by Glimmerglanger. Read by Exmanhater. In the end, the Horde failed. Catra saw it coming. She'd always known how fierce Adora could be, how determined. She was not surprised when Adora took on Hordak one-on-one. She did not charge in to help when Hordak called desperately for aid in that last battlefield, outside the oldest temple of the First Ones, the one place where he could either exert complete control over Etheria or be utterly destroyed. Adora, She-Ra, really, drove her sword down through Hordak's chest, batting aside his weapon, skewering him, and then, with one foot, pushing him off the end of the blade. The army gathered at She-Ra's back stood frozen in that moment as the world shook around them. The Horde soldiers, waiting in ranks, standing in place on Catra's orders, held their breath. Catra joined them, staring across the field of battle at She-Ra, who turned her head and met, for an instant, Catra's eyes. She-Ra looked away first, bending to wipe her blade clean on Hordak's flesh and straightening again. The path to the First One's temple began at She-Ra's feet. It was paved in glowing stones. The path ran downward at a steep angle to a single altar visible to all who cared to look down. The altar itself put forth golden light. The surface was carved with eyes and grasping hands. It looked hungry. "Force Captain?" one of the soldiers at Catra's back asked when She-Ra took the first step onto the glowing path. "Should we—" Catra waved the woman back, gesturing for the soldiers to stay in place as she walked across the muddied field of battle, past Hordak's empty body. The rebels watched her come, tightening their hands around their weapons, too cowardly to do anything without She-Ra, who was ignoring them all, marching down the path to the altar. "What's she doing?" Catra asked, holding one arm around her ribs. They stung. They were but one of the many hurts littered across her body, easy to ignore in the grand scheme of things. She'd taken worse injuries, more often than she could count. The softest of the lot, Glimmer, glanced quickly at Catra and then away, back at She-Ra. "I don't know, exactly. Lighthope told her that it was She-Ra's duty to heal Etheria, here, before you could destroy it all." Catra snorted. "I'm not," she started, and a tremendous crack of sound cut her off. Below them, in front of the altar, She-Ra had knelt and driven the blade of the sword through the top of the altar, spilling blinding light out around all of them, along with heat and a terrible sound. Adora screamed like she was being torn apart. "What's happening?" Catra demanded, thrown to her knees by the energy spiraling up and out of the altar. Her skin burned, her eyes stung, breathing hurt. Glimmer shook her head, bowed over on the ground, tears streaming out of her eyes. Adora's scream stretched out below them, redoubled, became a high, keening sob. It stuck in Catra's stomach like a hooked knife, slicing it behind her ribs, terribly sharp, brutal, vicious. Catra forced her way to her feet. Pain was only pain, after all. She'd experienced worse than this. She held her arm up in front of her face and took a step onto the glowing path. "What are you doing?" Glimmer yelled, somewhere behind her, but Catra ignored her. "No, you can't stop her. You'll ruin everything." Catra paid her no mind. It took all of her energy to keep walking forward in any case. The bottom of her feet burned, pain like knives lancing up through her legs. She smelled burning hair and flesh. But Adora was screaming somewhere down there in the Forsaken Hole. Adora, not She-Ra. Catra knew Adora's voice. The cries dragged her along, as effectively as a noose around her neck. Catra struggled onward, her eyes closed against the light, until Adora's screams stopped. And then Catra ran, ignoring the burning, splintering pain. She opened her eyes against the blinding light, like needles in her eyes, finding Adora rigid in front of the altar. She-Ra had gone, at some point, leaving Adora behind, her head thrown back, light blazing from her eyes and her mouth. Her hands were wrapped around the sword. It glowed white-hot. Smoke rose from her flesh. The world throbbed beneath Catra's feet. She could feel the raw power moving around them. It was impossible to miss. It felt like the heartbeat of the world, translating itself up through her feet, growing stronger with each gurgling sob from Adora's throat. Adora would die, Catra realized. She could kill Adora in a second. No one could stop her, not even Adora. Even if she did nothing, the altar, whatever power it was vomiting forth, it would do the job. Adora looked like she was frying from the inside out, cooked by the power that was, apparently, remaking the world. Tears ran down Catra's face, unwanted and ignored. She took another step forward, standing over the altar. She drew the blaster hanging at her waist. It was painfully hot, but she gripped it, ignoring the searing wash of agony up her arm. She could kill Adora. It wouldn't take any effort at all. She could kill her, undo the remaking of the world, and walk out, stealing the victory right out from under the rebellion. Who cared about Hordak when she could take his throne, breaking the spirit of the rebellion by dragging their heroine's broken body to dump it before them? She could show them, all of them, exactly what she was worth. Adora sobbed, light pouring out of her eyes, her limbs jerking in place, blood smoking as it ran out of her nose. Something in Catra's chest burned, hot and fast, in the spot where her anger lived. She shuddered, shifted the aim of her blaster, and fired at the altar. The world went quiet afterwards. That was what she remembered. It all went quiet, and then it went as loud as any sound ever created in the history of existence. So loud that something popped in Catra's ears, hot and wet. So loud that it threw her back a step, pushing her out of the way of a piece of shrapnel that blew past where her head had just been. She gasped for breath. There didn't seem to be enough air. She blinked away the black spots across her vision. Adora lay sprawled at the foot of the altar, smoke rising from her face. She wasn't moving, not at all. Catra lurched over to her, still holding the blaster in her hand. She tossed it aside, falling to her knees and rolling Adora onto her back. Her eyes were closed. Smoke curled out of her mouth. Burns stretched across her cheeks and around her ears. "No," Catra said, to no one, sliding her arms beneath Adora's shoulders and legs, and finding her feet in the midst of the terrible sound and the searing heat. She stood, wobbling, and locked her knees against the urge to collapse. Adora was limp and boneless in her arms, too tall to lift comfortably. "No," Catra said, and turned away from the altar and the shattered pieces of the sword. Leaving was easier than walking in. The force at her back propelled her along, up the steep incline of the golden path, out into a world of quiet and coolness. The world beyond the light was impossibly different. Catra stumbled to a halt, Adora heavy in her arms, her ears ringing, spots in her vision. There were armies, she was vaguely aware, armies arrayed around them. Behind her, a pillar of flickering light carved its way into the sky. Someone ran up beside her, Glimmer, yelling as Catra's hearing came back. "What did you do? What did you do? You've ruined everything!" Catra stared at her, the words meaning nothing. She could taste blood in her mouth. 2 armies stood around her. She had no weapons. Adora's head rested against her shoulder. She looked away from Glimmer, her gaze slipping jerky across the world, landing finally on a familiar sight. "Horse," she croaked, her voice some ruined sound. She remembered the horse. Adora rode the stupid winged thing. "Horse, take us away from here." "Actually, my name is Swiftwind," the horse said, tossing a mane of rainbows. And, "Get away from him," Glimmer called, popping into being directly beside Catra. Her hands balled into fists, and her eyes red and wet. "What have you done? What have—" "I saved her life," Catra said, too hurt and tired to manage any snap. "I saved her life," she repeated, testing the shape of the words. "After you let her walk down there to die." She turned before Glimmer could reply, stumbling up to Swiftwind, leaning against his bulk, Adora impossibly heavy in her arms. "Take us away from here," she repeated. "Oh," Swiftwind said. "Right." He knelt, and somehow Catra found her way across his back, ignoring the yelling coming from the figures thronged all around them. "Where are we going?" Swiftwind asked her. Catra just shook her head, holding Adora tight across her chest with one arm, wrapping her burned fingers into his mane with the other. He took off. The battlefield got small. The terrible light flickered one last time and went out.